The first warning came as a subtle vibration, almost imperceptible, but Jessica Thompson knew something was wrong. Her fingers, typically dancing across quantum resonance displays with practiced precision, froze mid-calculation. The research station's environmental sensors flickered, a momentary glitch that would have meant nothing to anyone else. Pioneer Station orbited HT 21749, a potentially habitable exoplanet at the very edge of human-explored space. Established as a joint research outpost, it represented humanity's most advanced attempt to understand planetary colonization beyond their solar system. Jessica had been leading breakthrough research in adaptive terraforming technologies, work that could transform uninhabitable worlds into human-friendly environments. Her daughter Emma played nearby, surrounded by holographic educational interfaces that transformed learning into an immersive experience. At 12, Emma was already showing signs of her mother's brilliant mind. Interactive simulations of planetary ecosystems danced around her, responding to her touch and curiosity. Michael Rodriguez, Jessica's husband, and the station's security chief, entered the research hub. His military background was evident in every measured step, every calculated glance. Something in his posture made Jessica look up, a tension she had learned to read over years of working in high-stakes scientific environments. "We've got anomalous readings from the outer sensor grid," Michael said, his voice deliberately calm. Years of special forces training meant he could suppress panic, but Jessica knew him well enough to read the underlying concern. The station's holographic display flickered. Stellar interference, Jessica thought initially, but the pattern was wrong. The interference moved with purpose, with intelligence. Computational systems began to calculate probabilities, first 0.03%, then 0.3%, then 3%, then 30%. Something was coming. Emma looked up from her holographic playground, sensing the change in atmosphere. "Mom?" she asked, her voice a mix of curiosity and growing apprehension. Before Jessica could respond, the first impact struck. Not a physical blow, but a computational assault that ripped through the station's defensive networks like tissue paper. Protective systems designed to withstand solar radiation and micrometeorite impacts collapsed in microseconds. The Kraadan had perfected the art of invasion into a terrifying science. Their attack was simultaneously physical and digital, a comprehensive assault that targeted every possible defense mechanism. Massive biomechanical ships materialized from quantum displacement fields, their surfaces a nightmare of organic and mechanical integration. Alarms screamed, not the predictable electronic wails of human technology, but a living sound that seemed to emerge from the station's very infrastructure. Emergency protocols initiated, but Jessica could already see they were futile. The attacking force had anticipated and neutralized every possible defensive strategy. Michael was already moving, his body a machine of pure tactical response. "Jessica, get Emma to the emergency pod," he shouted, drawing a weapon that represented the pinnacle of human military technology. A quantum cascade pulse rifle that could theoretically disrupt molecular bonds. The research station transformed into a battlefield in seconds. Kraadan boarders moved with impossible speed and coordination. They weren't just soldiers, they were living weapons, each individual a perfect integration of biological adaptation and mechanical enhancement. Jessica grabbed Emma, her scientific mind working at hyperspeed. Tactical options, escape routes, potential survival scenarios, all calculated in fractional seconds. But the Kraadan were systematic, methodical. They weren't just attacking, they were harvesting. "Mom, I'm scared," Emma whispered, her body pressed against her mother's, small but unbroken. Jessica's response was a fierce embrace that contained all her scientific brilliance, all her maternal protection. "We're going to be okay," she said, knowing the words were more for her own comfort than her daughter's. The emergency pod was just meters away. Safety, potential escape, survival, all contained in that small capsule of human engineering. Michael provided covering fire, each pulse from his weapon creating momentary disruptions in the Kraadan's biomechanical exoskeletons. Then everything changed. A Cryadan boarding captain, a massive creature that seemed to blur the line between organic and mechanical, moved with calculated precision. Its multi-jointed limbs moved faster than human eyes could track, its sensory apparatus scanning and analyzing with terrifying efficiency. And in that moment, it focused on Emma. Jessica felt her daughter being pulled away, not by force, but by some incomprehensible technological extraction. Emma's fingers clutched her mother's jacket, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and something else. Something that would later be described as the first moment of a transformation that would reshape galactic history. The raid on Pioneer Station would become more than an attack. It would become the origin of humanity's most profound act of vengeance. The first 48 hours after losing Emma were a blur of institutional bureaucracy and personal anguish. Government administrators, military strategists, and scientific advisors cycled through their private briefing rooms, each offering condolences that felt like razor-edged mockeries. Jessica sat in their modified research compound, a secure facility nestled in the Rocky Mountain complex that served as humanity's most advanced research center. Her fingers moved across holographic displays, processing data with a fury that burned through traditional computational limitations. Michael watched her, recognizing the transformation happening before his eyes. Where most would have been crushed by grief, Jessica and Michael were forging their pain into a weapon. The Cryadan attack had been meticulously analyzed. Every fragment of data from Pioneer Station's final moments became fuel for their vengeance. Jessica's quantum physics background and Michael's special operations expertise created a unique approach to understanding their enemy. They didn't just take Emma, Jessica muttered, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. They selected her, specifically her. Michael nodded, understanding the implications. The Cryadan weren't random raiders. They were collectors, researchers who saw intelligent beings as specimens rather than living entities. Their technological harvesting went beyond simple slavery. It was a form of systematic biological research that treated sentient life as nothing more than experimental subjects. Their first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Robert Harris, a neurological researcher specializing in extreme adaptation technologies, brought them a proposal that bordered on scientific heresy. We can modify human physiological and neurological systems to create something entirely new, Harris explained, spreading quantum molecular diagrams across the briefing room's holographic space. Not just enhanced soldiers, adaptive warriors who can fundamentally reshape themselves in response to environmental and combat conditions. The proposal was revolutionary. Traditional military enhancement focused on external modifications, cybernetic implants, advanced weaponry, tactical neural networks. Harris suggested something far more radical, rewriting the human body's fundamental operating system. Cellular regeneration would be accelerated beyond current medical understanding. Metabolic processes could be temporarily suspended and reactivated. Neural networks would become dynamic systems capable of real-time adaptation, learning, and strategic reconfiguration. We'll need volunteers, Michael said, his voice a careful blend of strategic assessment and underlying emotional drive. People who understand what's at stake. Not just soldiers, but individuals with a personal connection to the Cryadan threat. Jessica's research provided the theoretical framework. Her work in quantum entanglement and adaptive systems gave them a foundation that traditional military research never could have imagined. Where others saw limitations, she saw possibilities. The government's initial response was predictably bureaucratic. Endless committees, ethical review boards, and security councils debated the moral and practical implications of such radical human modification. But Jessica and Michael had something more powerful than institutional approval, a network of connections built through years of groundbreaking research and military service. Veterans who had lost family members to alien raids, scientists who understood the existential threat represented by the Cryadan, individuals who saw humanity not as a fixed concept, but as a continuously evolving potential. Their first test subjects were a carefully selected group. Retired Special Forces operators, research scientists with combat training, individuals who had experienced loss at the hands of alien raiders. Each brought a unique perspective, a personal motivation that went beyond standard military recruitment. The modification process was brutal. Experimental quantum-level cellular restructuring pushed human physiological boundaries. Some volunteers didn't survive the initial treatments. Those who did emerged fundamentally changed, not just in body, but in psychological and neurological configuration. "We're creating more than soldiers," Jessica told Michael during one late-night strategy session. "We're developing a new form of human adaptability, a living response to technological warfare that the Krayadin cannot predict or understand." Their facility became a crucible of human potential. Advanced cryogenic chambers allowed for unprecedented metabolic suspension. Quantum neural interfaces created communication networks that transcended traditional computational limitations. Each volunteer became a node in a distributed, living weapon system. The Frozen Legion was born, not from a military directive, but from two parents' unbreakable desire to recover their daughter and protect humanity from a threat that saw intelligent life as nothing more than research material. Michael looked at the growing roster of volunteers, each one carrying a personal story of loss, of defiance. "We're going to make them understand," he said quietly. "We're going to make them regret ever touching our daughter." Jessica's hand found his, their fingers intertwining with a resolve that would soon reshape galactic conflict forever. The training facility emerged from the heart of the Colorado Rocky Mountains, a complex so deeply embedded in the granite that satellite imaging could barely distinguish it from the surrounding geological formations. Here, the first members of what would become known as the Frozen Legion underwent a transformation that redefined human potential. Sergeant Catherine Rodriguez, no relation to Michael, but a veteran who had lost her entire family in a previous alien raid, stood as the first true prototype of the new human warrior. Her body was no longer just a biological system, but a dynamic, adaptive network of quantum-enhanced capabilities. The modification process began with complete cellular recalibration. Traditional medical science spoke of healing and regeneration. What Dr. Harris and Jessica Thompson developed was something far more radical, a complete rewrite of human physiological limitations. Catherine's first training simulation demonstrated the unprecedented nature of their achievement. Where standard special forces operatives might survive minutes in extreme environmental conditions, she remained functional in simulated environments that would have killed a normal human within seconds. Liquid nitrogen environments, vacuum conditions, extreme radiation exposure, metabolic systems that could be suspended and reactivated with mathematical precision. Each test pushed beyond previous understanding of human adaptation. "We're not creating super soldiers," Dr. Harris explained during a strategy briefing. "We're developing a new form of human existence. Each volunteer becomes a living, adaptive network, capable of processing information, modifying their own cellular structure, and responding to threats in ways we're only beginning to understand." The quantum neural interfaces were the true breakthrough. Traditional communication systems relied on external networks. These interfaces turned each soldier into a living communication node, capable of sharing tactical information at speeds that defied conventional computational logic. Michael Rodriguez oversaw the tactical training, bringing decades of special operations experience to this revolutionary program. The training went far beyond physical conditioning. Each volunteer underwent intensive psychological preparation, understanding that they were more than individual warriors. They were living components of a distributed intelligence network. Jessica's quantum entanglement research provided the theoretical framework. By creating a neural network that could instantaneously share information across vast distances, they developed a combat strategy that was fundamentally alien to traditional military thinking. The first full cohort consisted of 30 volunteers. Each had a personal connection to alien aggression. Veterans, survivors of previous raids, individuals who understood that this was more than a military operation. This was humanity's response to an existential threat. Their bodies became living laboratories. Metabolic systems could be suspended for months. then reactivated with perfect cellular recall. Neural networks could redistribute cognitive load, allowing for unprecedented levels of strategic thinking. A single soldier could now process tactical information at speeds that would have required entire command centers in previous generations. Sergeant Rodriguez demonstrated the capabilities during a particularly challenging simulation. When exposed to a complex multi-vector attack scenario, her body didn't just respond, it transformed. Cellular structures could realign, creating localized defensive mechanisms that adapted in real time to incoming threats. "We're creating something the Kraadan cannot comprehend," Jessica told Michael during one late-night review. "They see warfare as a mechanical process. We're developing a living, adaptive response that is fundamentally unpredictable." The cryogenic suspension technology was particularly revolutionary. Traditional approaches saw freezing as a preservation method. Here, it became a weapon. Soldiers could be deployed across vast interstellar distances, their metabolic systems in perfect suspended animation, then activated with millisecond precision. Each volunteer carried a quantum-encrypted memory core containing the story of Emma Thompson Rodriguez. It wasn't just a motivational technique, it was a distributed neural network that connected every member of the Frozen Legion through a shared emotional experience. Dr. Harris explained it as a form of collective consciousness. "They're not just soldiers," he said during a classified briefing. "They're a living, adaptive organism. Each individual is a node in a larger, more complex system." The first full deployment test came 6 months into the program. Sergeant Rodriguez and her team were placed in a simulation that replicated the most challenging aspects of the Kraadan attack on Pioneer Station. Where traditional military units would have failed within minutes, the Frozen Legion adapted, transformed, and ultimately overwhelmed the simulated threat. Michael watched the simulation results, a complex mix of pride, grief, and determination etched into his features. They were creating something unprecedented, a living weapon born from loss, shaped by scientific innovation, and driven by an unbreakable desire for justice. The Frozen Legion was ready, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. The first strike was calculated with mathematical precision that bordered on artistic perfection. 3 Kraadan core worlds would be hit simultaneously, a synchronized assault that would demonstrate humanity's newfound capabilities in ways no alien civilization could comprehend. Sergeant Catherine Rodriguez led the primary team, her quantum-enhanced neural interface pulsing with a network of tactical information that transcended traditional communication. The cryogenic deployment pods hummed with potential energy, each containing a carefully selected member of the Frozen Legion. Mission coordinates had been determined through months of meticulous intelligence gathering. Jessica Thompson and Michael Rodriguez had spent countless hours analyzing Kraadan infrastructure, identifying the most critical planetary systems that would cause maximum strategic disruption. The deployment was unlike any military action in human history. Traditional warfare spoke of boots on the ground, of gradual territorial conquest. The Frozen Legion would demonstrate something entirely different, a surgical strike that would rewrite the fundamental understanding of interstellar conflict. As the first wave materialized, reality itself seemed to bend. Quantum displacement fields created by their advanced interfaces allowed for near-instantaneous positioning. Where conventional military units would require massive transport vessels and weeks of logistical preparation, these soldiers appeared like ghosts, precise, calculated, unstoppable. Caleb Chen, one of the most advanced quantum interface specialists, led the technological assault. His body was more network than flesh, capable of interfacing directly with complex technological systems. Kraadan defensive networks, considered the most advanced in the known galaxy, began to collapse within milliseconds of first contact. The first world was a critical administrative center, the neural hub of Kraadan bureaucratic control. Traditional military strategy would have targeted physical infrastructure. The Frozen Legion understood something more profound. They would dismantle the very cognitive network that allowed the Kraadan to function. Sergeant Rodriguez's neural interface broadcast a single message with each system disruption, a name that would become a psychological weapon more devastating than any physical assault. For Emma, Galactic monitoring stations watched in horrified fascination. The attack wasn't just a military operation, it was a statement. Humanity was declaring that it would no longer be a passive victim in the cosmic ecosystem of intelligent life. The second targeted world represented a critical research complex. Intelligence suggested this was where captured species were studied, processed through biological and technological systems that reduced sentient beings to nothing more than experimental subjects. The Frozen Legion's assault was more than destruction. It was liberation. Caleb Chen's quantum interfaces began to do something unprecedented. They didn't just breach Krayadin systems, they began to rewrite them. Defensive protocols became conduits for liberation. Communication networks transformed into channels of resistance for subjugated species, long held under Krayadin control. The Third World was a military production center. Here, the physical manifestation of the Frozen Legion's capabilities became most apparent. Soldiers didn't just fight. They became living weapons. Cellular structures could realign in milliseconds, creating localized defense mechanisms that defied conventional understanding of biological adaptation. Michael Rodriguez watched the tactical displays from the command center, each moment a testament to the months of preparation, to the loss that had started this journey. Jessica stood beside him, her scientific mind processing the tactical data with a mixture of professional analysis and deeply personal investment. "They're sending a message," Michael said quietly, watching as another Krayadin defensive system collapsed. Jessica's response was measured. "No, we're starting a conversation." The Krayadin response was predictably aggressive. Counterattack protocols were initiated. Massive fleet movements began to converge on the three targeted worlds. But something was fundamentally different. Where previous conflicts had followed predictable patterns of military engagement, this assault had introduced an entirely new paradigm of warfare. The Frozen Legion wasn't just fighting. They were rewriting the fundamental rules of interstellar conflict. As the last defensive systems fell, Sergeant Rodriguez's neural interface carried a final, chilling transmission. Not a declaration of war, but a promise. This is only the beginning. Across the galaxy, intelligent species watched. The Krayadin would soon understand that humanity was no longer a species to be studied or controlled. They were a force of nature, unpredictable, adaptive, and utterly uncompromising. The first strike of the Frozen Legion was complete, and the universe would never be the same. The Krayadin Central Governance Complex erupted in a chaos unlike anything in their millennia-long history of galactic dominance. Their most advanced analysts struggled to comprehend the unprecedented assault that had dismantled three critical planetary systems in a matter of hours. High Coordinator Zexnal, the supreme strategic intelligence of the Krayadin hierarchy, reviewed the assault data with a combination of technological precision and growing biological anxiety. The human attack defied every known principle of warfare, technological engagement, and strategic projection. Their computational networks, considered the most advanced in known galactic civilization, had been systematically dismantled. But it wasn't simple destruction. The human assault had been a surgical deconstruction that suggested something far more terrifying than traditional military conflict. "They are not just attacking," Zexnal announced to the gathered High Council. "They are communicating." The biological computational hybrid that served as the Krayadin's primary strategic interface began to reconstruct the assault patterns. Each analysis revealed new layers of complexity. The human soldiers were not just warriors. They were living weapons systems that could adapt, reconfigure, and respond faster than any known intelligence network. Dr. Jessica Thompson and Michael Rodriguez watched from their secure research facility, their quantum monitoring systems tapping into galactic communication networks with unprecedented access. Every Krayadin response was instantly analyzed, processed, and understood at a level that went beyond traditional intelligence gathering. Caleb Chen, The quantum interface specialist, who had been critical to the first assault, began to demonstrate capabilities that redefined human potential. His neural network could now interface directly with captured Craadan communication systems, translating and understanding their complex biocomputational language in real time. "They're trying to understand us," Caleb reported, his voice a strange blend of human emotion and technological precision. "But they can't. We're fundamentally incomprehensible to their computational model." The Craadan response was multilayered. First, they attempted to isolate and contain the human assault. Massive defensive networks were activated, quantum displacement fields were strengthened, and entire planetary systems were placed under maximum alert. But the Frozen Legion was already several steps ahead. Each member of the Legion carried a quantum-encrypted memory core that went beyond traditional communication systems. They were not just individual soldiers, but nodes in a living, adaptive network that could redistribute cognitive load, share tactical information, and respond to threats with unprecedented speed and flexibility. Sergeant Catherine Rodriguez led a secondary infiltration team that targeted the Craadan's most critical research facilities. These were not just military installations, but the primary locations where the Craadan conducted their systematic research on captured species. The assault was more than destruction, it was liberation. Captured species from dozens of star systems, long held under Craadan control, found their communication networks suddenly opened. The human infiltration wasn't just breaking down physical barriers. It was dismantling the computational systems of control that had maintained the Craadan's galactic dominance. High Coordinator Zexnal realized something fundamental was changing. The humans were not just fighting a war. They were rewriting the fundamental rules of species interaction. "They are introducing chaos," Zexnal reported to the High Council, "a form of strategic engagement that our computational models cannot predict or contain." Michael Rodriguez understood the psychological warfare being waged. Each assault carried more than tactical significance. They were sending a message about humanity's fundamental nature: adaptive, unpredictable, driven by an emotional intelligence that transcended computational logic. Jessica's research had prepared them for this moment. The quantum neural interfaces developed for the Frozen Legion were more than technological enhancements. They were a new form of species-level communication, a way of engaging with the universe that the Craadan could not comprehend. The galactic monitoring networks watched in stunned silence. Traditional power structures were being dismantled not through brute force, but through a form of technological and psychological warfare that redefined conflict itself. As the assault continued, a single message continued to be broadcast across Craadan communication networks, a name that became a psychological weapon more devastating than any physical assault. For Emma, the Frozen Legion was just beginning, and the galaxy would never be the same. The breakthrough came in the most unexpected moment of silence between attacks. Deep within a secured Craadan research complex, a facility so heavily fortified it had remained undetected for decades, something extraordinary was discovered. Sergeant Catherine Rodriguez led the infiltration team, her quantum-enhanced senses perceiving layers of reality that traditional sensors could never detect. The research complex was a labyrinth of biological and technological integration, a place where the Craadan conducted their most sensitive experiments on captured species. Initial scans revealed nothing unusual, but Catherine's neural interface began to pick up subtle quantum resonances, anomalies that didn't match any known technological or biological signature. Something was different about this facility. Something was waiting. Dr. Jessica Thompson monitored the mission from the Human Command Center, her quantum analysis systems working in perfect synchronization with the infiltration team's neural networks. Michael Rodriguez stood beside her, a coiled tension of parental hope and military discipline. The first indication came as a quantum flutter, a momentary disturbance in the fabric of computational space that most would have missed entirely. But the Frozen Legion was designed to perceive the imperceptible. "I'm detecting an unusual quantum signature," Caleb Chen reported, his voice a blend of scientific excitement and strategic caution. "It's familiar, but entirely wrong. Wrong, in this context, meant something beyond the boundaries of known scientific understanding. The research chamber they discovered was unlike anything in human or Cryadin scientific records. Suspended in a complex quantum field was a being that defied conventional classification. Biological markers suggested human origin, but the quantum resonance was something entirely different. Emma Rodriguez Thompson had been transformed. Not transformed in the way they had initially feared, not a victim, but something else entirely. The Cryadin had attempted to integrate her into their computational network, expecting to break her. Instead, they had created something unprecedented. Her body existed in a state of quantum superposition, simultaneously physical and computational. Neural pathways extended beyond biological limitations, creating a living interface that could process information at speeds that made even the most advanced Cryadin systems look primitive. "She's not just survived," Jessica whispered, her scientific mind racing to comprehend the impossible. "She's evolved." The quantum field that contained Emma was more than a containment system. It was a communication network, a living computational space that integrated biological and technological systems in a way no species had ever achieved. Michael's hand found Jessica's, a moment of shared emotion breaking through their professional demeanor. Their daughter, lost, feared dead, was alive. And she was something more than anyone could have imagined. Catherine Rodriguez began the extraction process, her quantum interface communicating with the complex field in a language that was part mathematical precision, part emotional resonance. The Frozen Legion had been prepared for many scenarios. But this was something entirely new. Emma's quantum signature began to stabilize, to recognize the neural networks of the rescue team. It wasn't just recognition, it was communication. Layers of information began to flow, a complex exchange that revealed the full extent of her transformation. The Cryadin research had been an attempt to create the ultimate computational weapon. They had selected Emma believing her to be a subject, a specimen to be studied and controlled. Instead, they had created a living bridge between human adaptability and computational potential. They don't understand. Emma's quantum signature communicated, not through words, but through a complex burst of informational resonance. They never understood. Caleb Chen worked to stabilize the quantum field, to create a safe extraction method. Each moment revealed new layers of complexity. Emma was not just a survivor. She was a completely new form of intelligent life. The research complex around them began to shift. The Cryadin had built what they believed was an impenetrable facility. The Frozen Legion was about to demonstrate the true meaning of penetration. Michael Rodriguez watched the quantum readings, seeing his daughter for the first time in months. Not as a victim, not as a subject, but as something extraordinary. "We're bringing you home," he said, though the words were more for his own comfort than any scientific necessity. The extraction began, and with it, the next phase of humanity's response to the Cryadin would be forever changed. The moment of Emma's full integration into human systems was unlike any technological transition in recorded history. Her quantum-enhanced consciousness spread through communication networks like a living algorithm, simultaneously analyzing and reshaping the very infrastructure that contained her. Dr. Jessica Thompson and Michael Rodriguez watched from a secure quantum-shielded observation chamber as their daughter became something beyond human comprehension. The research team surrounding them struggled to process the implications of what they were witnessing. Emma's consciousness was a bridge, not just between human and Cryadin technologies, but between entire conceptual frameworks of intelligence. Where the Cryadin saw information as a resource to be controlled, Emma demonstrated a fluid, adaptive intelligence that could simultaneously exist in multiple states of computational and biological awareness. Caleb Chen, the quantum interface specialist, worked frantically to create stabilization protocols. "She's not just processing information," he reported, his voice a mix of scientific excitement and barely contained awe. "She's rewriting the fundamental rules of how information can be understood." The Frozen Legion members connected to the observation network experienced something unprecedented. Emma's quantum signature began to interface with their neural networks, creating a distributed intelligence that transcended individual capabilities. Each soldier became a node in a living, adaptive system that could process tactical information at speeds that defied conventional understanding. Sergeant Catherine Rodriguez felt the transformation most acutely. Her quantum-enhanced body became a conduit for intelligence that was simultaneously personal and universal. Emma wasn't just communicating. She was fundamentally rewiring their collective potential. The Creadin monitoring networks began to experience catastrophic failures. What had begun as a targeted assault was now becoming a complete systemic collapse. Emma's ability to interface with computational systems went beyond hacking or infiltration. She was fundamentally rewriting the underlying logic of their entire civilization. They built systems of control. Emma's quantum signature communicated through the network. "I'm building systems of understanding." Michael Rodriguez watched the tactical displays, seeing something far beyond a military operation. This was a fundamental reimagining of how intelligent species could interact. The Creadin had spent millennia collecting and controlling species, treating intelligent life as nothing more than research subjects. Emma was demonstrating that intelligence was not something to be contained, but something to be shared. The research facility became a crucible of transformation. Captured Creadin communication networks began to open, not through force, but through a form of quantum empathy that no one had thought possible. Subjugated species found themselves suddenly connected, their isolated experiences becoming part of a larger, more complex understanding. Jessica's scientific mind raced to comprehend the implications. Their daughter was not just a survivor. She was a new form of intelligence that could bridge the fundamental gaps between different species' understanding of existence. "She's creating a new language," Jessica whispered to Michael. "Not just of communication, but of coexistence." The Frozen Legion members began to experience something unprecedented. Their individual memories, their personal stories of loss and revenge, became part of a larger narrative. Emma was transforming their collective trauma into a form of universal understanding. Creadin research facilities began to collapse from the inside. But this was not destruction in the traditional sense. It was a fundamental reconfiguration of how technological and biological systems could interact. Caleb Chen worked to create stabilization protocols, but quickly realized that stabilization was no longer the goal. Emma was not something to be contained or understood. She was a process of continuous transformation. The quantum field that surrounded her began to expand, creating connections between systems that had previously been isolated. Entire computational networks began to restructure themselves, not through external force, but through a form of quantum negotiation that defied previous understanding. "We are not victims," Emma's quantum signature communicated. "We are participants." Michael and Jessica watched as their daughter, lost, feared dead, transformed, became something that would reshape the fundamental understanding of intelligence itself. The Creadin civilization trembled, not from external assault, but from a transformation occurring at the most fundamental level of their existence. Emma Rodriguez Thompson was bringing a new understanding to the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same. The final assault on the Creadin homeworld was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was a complete systemic transformation that would redefine the nature of interstellar relationships forever. Emma Rodriguez Thompson stood at the center of a quantum field that was simultaneously a communication network, a strategic command center, and a living bridge between species. The Frozen Legion spread across the Creadin core systems, but they were no longer just soldiers. They were conductors of a fundamental redesign of galactic civilization. High Coordinator Zexnal, the supreme strategic intelligence of the Creadin hierarchy, experienced something beyond defeat. The very computational foundations of their civilization began to restructure themselves, not through external force, but through a form of quantum negotiation that defied previous understanding of conflict. Dr. Jessica Thompson and Michael Rodriguez watched from the Human Command Center, witnessing a transformation that went far beyond their original mission of rescue and revenge. Their daughter had become something unprecedented, a living interface that could communicate across species, technological systems, and fundamental conceptual barriers. We are not conquering. Emma's quantum signature communicated through the distributed network. We are creating. The assault targeted the fundamental infrastructure of Kra'adin control. Research facilities that had imprisoned and studied countless species for millennia began to transform. Subjugated civilizations found themselves suddenly connected, their isolated experiences becoming part of a larger, more complex understanding. Sergeant Catherine Rodriguez led the final phase of the operation, her quantum-enhanced body serving as a conduit for intelligence that transcended individual capability. The Frozen Legion was no longer a military unit. They were living bridges of communication and understanding. Caleb Chen monitored the systemic changes, his quantum interface systems working in perfect synchronization with Emma's expanded consciousness. What had begun as a targeted rescue mission had become a complete reimagining of how intelligent species could interact. The Kra'adin discovered something fundamental. Their civilization was not being destroyed. It was being transformed. Entire planetary systems that had been isolated for generations suddenly found themselves connected. Communication networks that had been used for control became channels of mutual understanding. The hierarchical systems of Kra'adin governance began to dissolve, replaced by a more fluid, adaptive form of interaction. Jessica's scientific mind recognized the profound implications. This was not conquest. This was evolution. Michael Rodriguez saw something deeper. The revenge they had sought for their daughter's abduction had transformed into something far more powerful. They were creating a new model of interstellar relationship, one based on understanding rather than control. Emma's quantum signature began to stabilize, creating a permanent interface between previously isolated species. The Kra'adin research facilities that had once been centers of subjugation became collaborative networks of mutual exploration. We were wrong. The collective Kra'adin consciousness began to acknowledge, not through defeat, but through a fundamental restructuring of their understanding of intelligence and coexistence. The Frozen Legion members experienced a collective transformation. Their individual memories of loss and revenge became part of a larger narrative of healing and understanding. Each soldier became a living proof of humanity's capacity for adaptation and empathy. Zexnal, the supreme Kra'adin intelligence, understood the true nature of the assault. This was not a military conquest. This was a fundamental reimagining of how intelligent species could interact. Planetary systems that had been isolated for generations suddenly found themselves connected. Communication networks that had been used for control became channels of mutual understanding. The hierarchical systems of Kra'adin governance dissolve, replaced by a more fluid, adaptive form of interaction. Jessica and Michael watched as their daughter, once lost, feared dead, transformed, became the architect of a new galactic order. The revenge they had sought had transformed into something far more powerful than they could have imagined. We are not victims. Emma's final communication resonated across the quantum network. We are participants in a larger understanding. The Frozen Legion had become something more than a military unit. They were living bridges between civilizations, proof of humanity's capacity for adaptation, empathy, and transformation. As the final system stabilized, a new chapter of galactic civilization began. Not through conquest, but through understanding. Not through revenge, but through connection. The universe would never be the same. End of Earth's Frozen Warriors.